Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. And as much as I might try that introduction in the smooth, suave tones you normally hear from Tom, it will never work out. And Tom is out on some well deserved PTO this week. So while it's usually me that needs to miss an episode because of travel, this week I get to drive the ship solo. And I'm sure we'll get Tom's assessment when he returns. So let's get on with it. I want to welcome to the show Charlene Li. Charlene is founder and CEO of Quantum Networks Group, an executive transformation coach, and author of the book Winning with Generative AI. Charlene, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. So let's start out just by sharing a bit about your journey and how you became an expert in disruptive transformation strategies.
Sure. I actually grew up Asian American in Detroit. And so, as you can imagine, there aren't very many of us in Detroit. And so, just was used to being very different in the room. And I carried that with me, I realized, into the workspace, into business and technology. And so, have felt very comfortable being a disruptor because by simply being in the room, I am disruptive.
Right.
So I thought about how to think about change in a very different way. And instead of saying change is something that you fear, you try to resist, or you take on only in certain circumstances, I look at change as an opportunity for growth. And so when I look at technology, I look at business challenges, especially at how technology can change the way we relate to each other and the way that we work. I get very excited and I can see the possibilities. And I think my superpower has been translating how technology can work and simplifying the technology into ways that we can understand it, wrap our arms around it, and then be able to think about how we can adapt and change and be optimistic and curious about it rather than fear it.
It's so needed in today's world, and I think it's a skill that not many people have. So simplifying things is I think is really necessary. And your work, it focuses on the intersection of technology and leadership and strategy. I think with a focus on that leadership part, I'm always interested to hear what inspires people to do what they do. So what inspired you to follow this path, and how do you see your work evolving in the context of now this new world of AI and digital transformation?
Right. Well, I started in my work really around disruptive technologies as an analyst at Forrester Research. And in 2008, my co-author Josh Bernoff and I wrote a book called Groundswell that talks about how companies can use social technologies. And I remember this one distinct meeting where a CEO came up to me and said, I get it. Social is going to be really important, but how open, how authentic, how real do I need to be?
Mm,
And I realized this was not a technology challenge. This was a leadership challenge. And that when it comes to adopting these technologies, when we talk about digital transformation, we oftentimes think about the digital part, the technology part,
sure.
and not the transformation part. So I realized I could talk about technology till I'm blue in the face, but if I didn't talk about the leadership part, the culture part, it would be for naught. So my focus shifted, and my second book was about open leadership, about how you have to transform your leadership and you could do that with these technologies, how to have these two things fit together rather than separately.
It's an interesting question he posed to you. How real do I need to be? Some of the most inspiring and easy to follow leaders are the ones that are the most transparent and the most real. And to have somebody considering how real to be is interesting, and it kind of is a good segue into some of your other topics that you talk about in your writing and speaking engagements. You often talk about the concept of being a realist optimist, right? I find that optimism can be, especially in today's world, a daily task, almost a chore. It's an intentional choice, though, and at least it has to be deliberate and top of mind. I'm curious if you can and it can explain a bit about the concept of the real optimist or the realist optimist in a little bit more
Yes.
detail.
Yeah, people tend to be wired to be more optimistic about things, more pessimistic about things. Now, there's lots of studies that correlate optimism with happiness and longevity. And
Mm,
so there are lots of practices you can do to take a more optimistic view of the world, how to see the world as a glass half full rather than half empty. And the challenge of being an optimist is sometimes you can get Pollyannish. You can think, well, the world's going to be great. It's just going to be fantastic. And people around you go, you're not being realistic about this. You're not seeing the challenges and the limitations. And so, especially tech optimists tend to have a bright, shiny object aspect of
right.
things. So, I like to temper the optimism with this healthy dose of realism. Okay, this is great. We're optimistic about what this technology could do, about the prospects for this. But let's be realistic. Here are the challenges, here are the capabilities, but here are the limitations. And then also, here are the feasible things we can do within our organization. Because if you do not put in plans that can actually work, all your optimism is going to be for nothing. It'll go nowhere because you haven't anticipated the difficulties, the challenges that have to be overcome.
Yes, one of the things that was driven into me from a very early stage of my career, the technology is great, but if you're not solving a problem, you're doing technology for technology's sake. And if you haven't figured out how you're going to operationalize it and make it real based on the realities of your environment and the world today, then your transformation will fail. Um,
Exactly.
and you've advised a number of leading companies on this topic, exactly on transformation. From your experience, what are some of the common challenges they face, especially when implementing something major, a major tech change? And more importantly, what are some of the strategies they've used to overcome those?
Yeah, the number one challenge I hear is that how do I get my leaders on board? This
Mm,
is a change we need to have happen. Our competitors are doing it, we're falling behind, and our leaders are just stuck. They're just stuck. They don't want to move forward. They see it's challenging and they don't care. And so, how can I get them interested in this new technology? And I go, it's the only way you can break through it to a leader is to talk to the top three strategic objectives that they care about because they're great leaders. They're in that leadership position because they have been successful at implementing and executing on their top strategic objectives. And just focus on the top three and align this new technology to how you can help it, how that technology can help them achieve one of those top three goals. Because it's a lot easier to mold how the technology is going to be used to, again, as you said, solve a problem, be a
right.
solution, than trying to change one of those top three objectives of that leader. You're just, it's not going to work. You're not going to change those top three objectives. You're not going to get them to care. So if you can orient this change around something they care deeply about, that they wake up every single morning thinking about, that they spend every fiber of their being thinking about how to solve this challenge, they will get very curious. And if you can create that curiosity, then you can start working on this. You can get that interest, that curiosity, and the interest to actually dig into what's going on with this technology. It can't be about technology. It's never about the
Right.
technology.
I love a couple of things there. The aspect of curiosity. How can things be different? How many times in our careers have we heard a leader say, "Well, we've been doing it this way forever and it works, so why change? Change is hard." But the other thing that I like is that it's from the viewpoint of the bottom up, the grassroots people on the ground who know what needs to be done, trying to convince or sell internally a change to leadership, but flip it around because some of the most successful transformations that I've seen get support from the top and from the bottom. So think about how IT leaders should think about applying some of those principles, especially in the context of AI adoption, which in itself can be scary, especially to teams who feel like it's going to replace them. What strategies can leaders use, or any IT operation leader, to effectively communicate those benefits and address concerns from their teams about resistance or change in general?
Well, I think that the biggest fear, and it's rightfully there, that people are concerned that AI is going to take your job. But I remind people it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's people using AI who are going to take your job. So the best thing you can do is to run towards this, to understand how it can help you. And for you as an IT leader to explain to people, this is how it can help us do our jobs better. Now, I worked really closely with one call center, and they made it clear from the very beginning they were not putting in AI to take people's jobs. That was not the purpose.
Mm,
The purpose was to, first of all, create a better experience for their customers. Second, to make everybody in that process a better service agent. And then third, because of that increase in productivity, they were going to start tackling this long, long list of new innovations and products and services they always wanted to create, but never had the time, people, and the money to do that. And they said AI is going to create a competitive advantage for us. We're going to create new businesses. And the faster we do this, the sooner we can, again, be elevating everything that we do on behalf of our customers. That's a very different message than saying we're going to use AI to become more productive so that we can save money and have it end up in the bottom line in the purses of our shareholders.
mm.
That's a very, very different message. And that intent and the reason, the strategy behind why you are putting in AI, the purpose of it, align with what you're trying to do as an organization is extremely important right from the get go. So again, this organization saw quality increase so that the errors were reduced by 85 to 90%. Training was improved in terms of the speed, so reduced training time from 30 to 40%. And in just overall satisfaction, people began to feel joy in their job because they didn't have
Mm.
to do the routine things, the mundane things that they really didn't like about their jobs. And so it all overall has been a net good thing. Now, the reality is jobs are going to change because tasks are being automated. The things that you used to do, the things that define jobs are going to change. And as a result, career ladders are going to change. So this is a transformation. It is not an easy one, but the assurances from the top that this is our goal, this is our ambition, this is our purpose for putting this in creates this scaffolding for people to know that this is why we're going through this change and transformation.
So how about at the individual level? I think it resonates for people that this is, give them a reason for it and what it means to the company. You've had a focus on building movements, right? And those movements can be very emotional for people and they follow an inspirational leader. I'm curious your thoughts on inspiring and engaging with service delivery teams at an individual level so that they see these as opportunities not only for the company they work for, but as opportunities for themselves as well, rather than that threat. What's in it for me?
Well, again, I keep going back to leadership and culture,
Mm,
in that when you're putting in these new technologies, it's also an opportunity to change the things about your culture that you don't like. And so, a very simple way to, again, to think about culture is that simply the beliefs and the behaviors that you have as an organization. It's not what's on the wall. It's what people actually do day to day in their behaviors and reflects their beliefs. So if you don't like your culture, then you change your beliefs and you change your behaviors. So a very simple one is I don't have permission to do whatever. Well, why is that? So how do you start changing that? Another one is, well, that's just the way we do things around here. You mentioned that before. People just have done this for decades,
right.
and so that's the way it is. How do you systematically change that to say, instead of saying that's the way we do things around here, every time we hear that, we ask, why do we do things that way? And to say, could we do it a different way? Have we looked? Have we checked? Let's confirm that it is. Let's take the extra cycles because there might be a better way and we don't know until we try. So those are, it's just some example of beliefs, but it's very simple for any organization to hear that, to understand that. And when you talk about the individual, the most incredible, powerful thing you can do is to check in with them and say, what are your beliefs about how the organization works, how the relationships are, what power do you have? and you'll get a lot of information on what people stand, where people stand. And until you do, if people are just very quiet and you don't have an idea, you can do all the engagement surveys that you want of your employees. But unless you have that conversation of what do you believe? And do we hold these things to be true? And what do we believe is holding us back? And then have an active discussion to say, wow, we all agree that this belief we don't want to believe anymore. Let's all not believe that anymore and believe just the opposite. It's incredibly powerful and can change cultures, not only in teams, but inside of whole entire departments and companies very, very quickly if you focus on those beliefs.
It's kind of like what we talked about with optimism versus pessimism, right? The easy path is to instantly knee jerk, everything's bad, and come out with a negative opinion versus intentionally looking at positive outcomes, positive directions. Curious, a lot of the work that you've done involves that empathy and understanding of the individual. Any other recommendations for service desk managers to help with kind of the settling of nerves and removal of fears and uncertainties, especially, and let's face it, a service desk can typically be seen as an entry level job and potentially one that is easily replaced with technology. What other principles or what things can managers do of people to allay those fears and uncertainties?
Yes. First of all, we always think that change is going to happen a lot faster than it actually
Mm,
does. And so we still have time. We have, good couple years, I believe, before any major change happens where you're seeing radical shifts in how service centers are actually staffed. And so, because it takes time for the technology to develop, for us to feel comfortable using it in a way that we trust it. We still trust people more than the machines. But over time, the machines are going to get better and better and better. And so, what I encourage individuals to do, and their managers and their leaders, is to develop the levels, the skills that are going to be required to be successful in this new world. And it asks that, especially when you're coming in at entry level, is that you come in at a different level. Now, we know that with training with AI, the speed at which people go from entry level to average is minimized. It is tremendously minimized.
mm,
And so, what we call entry level jobs won't necessarily exist because the level of quality and expectations of performance are just going to be higher thanks to AI. And that has been true across history. 60% of the jobs that exist today didn't exist 40 years ago.
yeah.
And so we're going to continue to see this shift happening. Again, it's not overnight, so you have some time. But I do believe it's extremely important that we take advantage of the opportunity right now to get AI ready, to be AI first as quickly as you can. One organization said, the CEO said, we're a service organization. Everyone here is in a knowledge job. So we are going to get AI ready, AI first. We're all going to get trained on AI. We'll all have access to a pre-approved set of tools. And we're going to have a dashboard that has every person's name on it. And next to each person's name is going to be a light. A green light if you're actively using these tools, a yellow light if you're figuring it out. You're trying, but you haven't quite figured it out yet, but you're getting there. And a red light if you're doing nothing. And then he drew a line in the sand
Hmm.
and said, in 6 months, there would be no more red lights. You'll either be yellow and trying it, or you'll be actively green, or we'll have come to an agreement that this is not the organization for you. And I think it takes that leadership, that kind of culture shift to say, this is our future. We're going to invest in every single person so that you at least hit the ground running. You at least have exposure to this. Standing still, being a red light is no longer acceptable. I think that's what it's going to take. Supported, scaffolded, again, it's honest conversations to say, is this the place that's a good fit for you? And if it's not, we'll help you find another position. But if you want to take on this challenge, then come along for the ride.
I love that. It's really that's a great example of being deliberate about it, making it known, giving them the plan, and helping them along with it. I love the concept of being scaffolded. There's one aspect of this that I think is worth exploring a little bit, and the technology capability of AI is really no different than other technology capabilities that have come along over the years. It drives certain outcomes and it solves certain problems, but this feels like, especially with the advancements in Gen AI and machine learning and large language models over the last couple of years, it feels a bit like the tail's wagging the dog. We've got this cool creation, and now everyone's trying to figure out what to do with it. It wasn't created specifically to solve any one problem, so they're figuring out how to apply it to their problems. I'm curious how leaders can take the principles you've talked about and help teams make the transition when it's not clear, we're at A and we're moving to B. We're actually at A, we're moving to Z, and we're going to figure out the alphabet in between as we go. How do you help people navigate change when the destination is vague?
Right. I think there's a disconnect right now because we're hearing a lot about AI, but we haven't really seen what it can do and experience it. And frankly, it's still under the works. It's
Yeah.
still being developed. I'm very optimistic about AI agents in particular because right now you have to sit at the keyboard, have to type everything in, everything's a prompt. I hate the word prompt engineering. It should be called prompt conversations, much
Right.
more so. But it is a conversation, and it's like an art rather than a science. So it's just a bit of a mess. It's really, really early right now. But as we develop AI agents that can truly automate things, that can take on and be augmented to us without us having to be there, things are going to change significantly. Now, one of the things I think is so important is for us to, as leaders, again, to get our hands dirty. Because when people ask me, well, how can AI create value? My first response to them is, how often are you using AI personally?
Mm.
Because if you're using AI, you won't ask that question. I think there's a knowing, doing, leading gap where we know about AI, but the vast majority of people, of leaders, are not using it. And then if you don't use it, if you have not personally experienced the transformational nature of generative AI, then there's no way you can lead an organization. So my top recommendation is to set up an AI that you can safely use, where you know the information you put into it is not going to be training the model. And then train your
Right.
top two levels of leaders on how to use it to do the things they do every day. That is to create content, to do research, and to use it as a thought partner. These are three activities that every single leader does. And then start capturing the prompts, capturing the best practices and sharing them with each other. And you'll develop, again, this institutional knowledge of how you're using AI as an organization. And you will not help yourself, but find and think about opportunities to use AI to solve strategic problems in the organization. The last thing you want to do is to develop hundreds and thousands of potential use cases because those are all experiments and
Mm.
they're just going to be on the margin and you're going to go to the least common denominator of what's the least painful to do versus saying here's our strategy, these are our biggest problems that we could really use help with. How can we apply AI to help with those problems? Where is our competitive advantage and how can we use AI to create even more advantage, shore up against new entrants or substitutes? How do we use those new capabilities to develop new business models? Those are the questions that leaders should be asking. Not, goodness, how do we create value with AI? No, how do you create value as a business today? And how can AI support the way you create value?
It's a subtle difference in how you think about it, but I think it's incredibly important. I've listened to social media influencers, I've listened to authors speak, and the most creative ones in this day and age look at AI as a creative partner. I like the idea of the thought partner. They don't look at it as a cheat code or a shortcut. They look at it as that creative partner. And why does my creative partner need to be a human when I can get so much more material and valuable information from AI? It doesn't mean eliminate all humans from my creative world, but having that AI partner, I think, is huge. The other thing that you've talked about that's really important is the feedback loop. So talk about effective feedback mechanisms that can help teams adjust to this AI world and continually evolve with the tech.
Yeah, I was just talking about being a manager, a coach to your team. And
Mm,
so you sit down with a team member and you go, "So, how's it going? What are the challenges that you're having?" And the team member goes like, let me think about that." And you both have imperfect memories about everything that's
right.
happened. And AI can actually sit there and understand and listen to every single conversation that that agent is having, and actually in real time give recommendations. Or the agent can go and ask the agent, the AI, you know, I had a hard time with that last call. What recommendations would you have for how I can improve it? Because transcripts are available, they can listen for intonations and provide that real time feedback when it's most effective. And then can collect all of that information, provide it to the coach or manager, and then say, hey, these are some ideas and ways that we have identified. Now provide that in-person coaching because you know that person so much more detail. But having just that gathering of information that is always available and there. I use it because I will send in transcripts into my AI coach and say, I that did not go well. What happened here? Or my best thing would be eventually to send an avatar of myself into a meeting that can just ask the questions I would normally ask, depending on the type of meeting it is. But that's yet to come. So that would
Yeah.
be my ideal agent. So I could go to fewer meetings. But there are so many ways that you can think about using AI to be that coach. I personally use it when I'm writing to give me feedback.
Mm,
And my editor is so happy because she gets this really clean draft. She goes, "This is so good. That's so clean." I'm like, "Yes, thanks to my AI." And I have it tuned specifically to be an editor. It has instructions, it has samples of my writing, so it doesn't try to change my writing. And even use it sometimes to help draft a first draft, and annoyingly includes all of my grammatical errors. So it is truly implementing my style and my tone when I'm as I'm writing. So there's I think the hardest part about this is realizing that AI can do a pretty darn good job. As a writer, to realize that it could write like me, that it could do research like me, it could think like me, is a hard thing to fathom because it calls up again that existential question. If it can do that, then who am I?
right.
I mean, I could go into ChatGPT, and I've been testing this, and I would tell it to be me. And I would give it questions like the questions you're asking me here, and it'll do a decent job of answering them. And so what I realize is, how can I be better than my AI when I'm constantly feeding data into that AI
Hmm.
model by publishing content, by doing podcast interviews? It means that I have to be more creative, I have to be more curious, I have to be more, I have to synthesize more information and use the AI to help me do that better and faster than I could have ever done in the past. I cannot stand still. And so that's
That's
the challenge that's going to be in the future. We will not be able, if you want to really benefit and stay, and it's been true for a long time. If you fear it, it's because the challenge of growing is scary. And so this is not about fearing AI, it's about fearing growth and change.
yeah. It's fascinating because just on a personal note, I'm in the midst of putting my second book together, experimenting with AI as that creative partner. You sounds like you're much farther down the journey than I am. Maybe I need to connect with you offline and you can give me some tips and tricks on it. But looking ahead, let's just put the kind of the crystal eight ball in front of us in terms of the IT leaders that are listening. What do they need to be most mindful of when preparing their service desk team or any IT team for future developments? How can your principles guide them through some preparations for what's about to come down the road?
I like to use two things. I like to use this idea of build to buy, and especially if you're, as you're experimenting, there will be many opportunities to take content off, take technology right off the shelf and start using it. And then you'll feel, oh, that's not perfect. That's not the way I want to have it work. What can I do? And you can use development resources to try to build things on your own. Now, here's the thing is, you may not want to build it to be perfect for your needs, but you're
Mm,
building it to be able to understand what are the possibilities so that you can go back to the vendors and say, well, this is what I want. And so this is a great opportunity as an IT leader to not just take what's off the shelf and say, well, that's just the way it is. I'm just going to have to wait for something better to come along. It's to actively work with the vendors because they want the feedback. It is that the cycles of development right now are so fast, so quick. So your ability to stay ahead of that and to actually have a say in how the products and services are being built only come when you are actually building it yourself. So this mentality of build to buy versus having to staff up a huge staff to be able to go and develop these things and customize them on your own. I think, again, having a small, nimble staff that can be very clear about what your requirements are is going to be much more a better use of your development time because the cycles are, again, there are just so many things happening
right.
and changing. The second thing I would say is for the staff in particular, for your team, is to develop trust
Yep.
in the technology, but also trust in each other. The hardest thing to do as a leader is to delegate. We talk about delegation as okay, so it's an important thing as a leader to do, but we all know it is incredibly difficult to do because it requires
Hmm.
trust. And so, what is it going to take for you to delegate to an AI? And that's across the board, not just a leadership issue. Again, it's a fundamental question. What are the markers of trust that is needed inside of my organization, inside of my team? How do we begin to trust AI to do the job we want it to do? How do we begin to be comfortable letting go? So that's an important work to do. And it doesn't happen overnight. Again, trust is developed from experience in every interaction over and over and over again. And sometimes it's broken. And how do you rebuild it? So, how do we, again, you love that word scaffolding, create the scaffolding so that trust can be developed?
Such a fascinating conversation. And like so many of these episodes that we do, I wish this one could go on. There's so much more we could cover. This is another great angle to consider for people when diving into AI adoption. Charlene, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
And before we go, and we'll put it in the show notes, but let people know where they can find you and your work.
And they can find me at charleneli.com. And all of my content appears on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. I've taken a brief look at it, and I will absolutely be diving deeper into it personally. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining the episode without our main man, Tom. He's off in the wilds of Wales, but provided he survives that wilderness, he'll be back with us in the driver's seat for the next one. Until then, thanks again, and we'll talk again soon.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.